court. They hadn't had one. Basically, like that, vote in the House of Commons. We have only amended our Constitution 27 times, and 10 of those amendments were done in the first 2 years, right? So it's a very, very different way of proceeding. What we have to do, if we want to change with the times, is to see things in our Constitution that nobody knew were there at the time. And you know that's really where the argument over the Constitution ends up.
That's right. Your question.
The seeds and evolution you've described of the limit of power on government through English, this history and consequent colonial and American culture. Are there any other examples of this throughout the world of a people or a government submitting to such limitations? Or is this sort of a unique English culture thing?
It wasn't unique at the time. In fact, the period of the early 13th century was a period when a lot of charters of liberties were being issued. You could see them in Spain at the time, in Poland. So this was a trend around Europe at the time. The thing is that all the others basically went by the boards. The English one is the only one that remained salient. So it was the sort of lone survivor of a trend that was very operative.
I will add to that. I mean, from my point of view, as a judge appointed for life who can do whatever I think is right, you know, I see foreign judges who come to visit in Washington, and I try to describe our American system of justice to them. And they all have great constitutions, and they all have lots of things on paper that sound terrific. But push comes to shove, if they can be replaced by the king or the ruler of the country easily, it has to affect how they rule in cases. We've never impeached a judge in our history for how they ruled in a case. We've been fortunate. There was an effort to do it one time with the Supreme Court justice. It failed. And we've never impeached a judge because of how they ruled in a case. They have only been impeached when they got in some other trouble. As we know, sometimes that happens. But judges are free to do what they think is right. And it's an independence of our judiciary that really doesn't exist in many countries. So that whatever they have in their constitution, or whether they have something like the Magna Carta, is really less important than the way their judiciary functions and whether it has independence. So from my point of view, one of the most important things of our system of justice and separation of powers that started with the Magna Carta and empowering judges to decide when the king is violating the law, our system of justice ensures that we have that independence, which I think is one of the geniuses of our system.
Can I add, as an appendix to that, the place where I'd start to look for the explanation, because I was thinking about this as you were talking, and it's very marked difference systems, is that all of continental Europe in the Middle Ages and early modern period ends up following the Justinianic Code, which also gets shipped out to weird places like South Africa and so on. And it's an autocratic system. It's a system that operates very top-down, where the English system, if we can talk about their constitution being flexible now, you know, what was it back in the Middle Ages? It was, you know, kings negotiated with barons. There were frequent rebellions and civil wars, not as bad as the Spanish, but and there were moments of autocracy. But in the end, the whole legal system is founded on judicial precedent, really. You know, so there must be something in that explains why this particular Charter of Liberties lasts, and not just that England had better librarians who kept copies.
I think that's right. Yes, sir.
That's sort of along the lines of the question I was going to ask, which would be, given the fact that during this period, you know, of late medieval history, there were a lot of people trying to use law for different purposes. I've read that the rulers were typically fostering the start of the study of canon law and fostering the origin of the universities, in part to use the rule of the church's law to help justify their own rule. But what was in it for the English barons at this time that caused them, even though bad King John, as we call him, was so very bad, what what do you think prompted them to turn to law in this case, as opposed to the usual solution, which was to go sack his castles and burn and choose another king the old-fashioned way?
I've written on this. I thought it suitably obscure, but you've asked the question, and the difference is the English develop, and you don't see this anywhere in continental Europe, a literature of complaint that is founded on law. And so the way you complain about a monarch is with legal texts. And that tends to be the focus. And you also produce legal texts as part of that. And so I study what are called Anglo-Norman legal apocrypha. If that doesn't put you to sleep, nothing will. And what that means is texts whose authority is unknown and produced in the post-conquest period. And there are forgeries and frauds, and they are loved by the English. And especially after Becket, the English who are resentful of the king, I think it's the bishops, are making copies of these and then using them to argue their cases. Not in the sense of they're citing it, but they're getting fuel to the fact that things, if the king is going to point to the past and say, that's the way I am, we have the evidence against him. So that's how they begin to complain to monarchs. And I think that actually plays in. The text I mentioned earlier, the Laws of the English, the Leges Anglorum, is produced in 1206, probably. And it's some of the same people involved in the Magna Carta debate have chosen the vehicle of this huge compendious list of all the laws of England translated into Latin, into which they've inserted principles that they want to govern things. That is their big strike. It doesn't go anywhere. And then you end up with the developments in the Civil War and Magna Carta.
Let me just add to that once King John repudiates Magna Carta, the barons do choose an alternate claimant to the throne. They actually offer the throne to Prince Louis of France, who is the son of the King of France, who had the whole conflict with John in the first place. And they invite Prince Louis of France onto English soil with a French army and attempt to depose King John. So if you're not going to follow the law, we're going to replace you. And that's something that the English do repeatedly. And the last time they do it is with the Glorious Revolution. And when James II, the Stuart king, is deposed, and one of the reasons that he's deposed is because he interferes with the independence of the judiciary. That's one of the things that really, it's a straw that breaks the camel's back when he tries to fire justices for ruling against the king.
One last question over here.
Yeah, hi, Elaine Middleman.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Judge Lamberth. Former Chief Judge Lamberth, I should say. I recently was in a conversation with another lawyer. The Supreme Court has a case called Garcetti, which limited employee speech under the First Amendment. And this lawyer just had argued a case in the Connecticut Supreme Court, and I was reading about it, and the Connecticut judges said, well, we're going to have a higher standard than the federal. And I just thought that was pretty shocking. And I was wondering if the Magna Carta made some distinction between state constitutions and laws and federal.
In its origins, no. I mean, because it is just a statement about the realm, however fuzzy its borders. How it gets used, I don't know. I mean, is there anything about state interpretations versus federal interpretations or uses of Magna Carta?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, when you think about, I mean, this is more broadly about state versus federal law. I mean, one of the metaphors that's used is that the state can set a higher ceiling but not a lower floor. So a state can give rights beyond what the federal government requires but can't set the level of rights lower. So this is more responding just to how this happens in U.S. law. But I think it happens because we have this strong tradition of states' rights and that states are sensitive about what they're let alone to do.
Good. Well, on behalf of all of us in the audience, I want to thank Rob and Jenny and Bruce for a very enlightening discussion. I also want to thank all of you hardy souls for showing up on a night like this. So I commend you for being here. I didn't think there'd be that much interest in Magna Carta, so I'm glad to see you all here.
had an ex-wife, and he made Isabel of Angoulême and the first wife live together under the same roof. That was the sort of charming fellow he was. When Isabel of Angoulême, when King John died, Isabel of Angoulême returned to France, never mentioned King John again, and married the son of the original fiancé. Not joking, really happens.
Women are coming together to really celebrate our empowerment, the right to vote, and map out a plan for the future.
And real women in the park. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth.
Starting this fall 2019, there will be 19.2 million college students in this country. Out of those, more than 11 million, a little more, 11.2, are women. If all these young ladies, these women, went out and voted, then we would see men and women in office who represent what matters to us as women. We're going to have our reproductive rights protected. We're going to have equal pay. We're going to have childcare.
Keep on representing, baby. We're going to ignite their minds.
Ignite their minds.
Their passion.
Their passions.
Let them feel it, understand it, explore it.
Please welcome Chair of the National Archives Foundation, Governor Jim Blanchard.
Good evening. We have a great show tonight for you. We're glad you're all here, especially Mrs. Laura Bush. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. I'm speaking on behalf of our foundation, our National Archives Foundation, and our Executive Director, Patrick Madden, who you'll hear from, and also our Board of Directors. In fact, I would like our Board of Directors to please stand. All right. This is our 2018 Records of Achievement Award ceremony. We are a nonprofit partner with the National Archives, and we offer support, financial, creative support, energy to help the archives tell the American story and to really enhance the archives' mission of making billions of important federal documents, photographs, film, and artifacts accessible to the public. In short, we work to tell the American story. Our foundation works to inspire Americans to learn about our past and play an active role in our future. And we're committed to capturing the American story in its entirety through a number of exhibitions, events, public programs, and educational initiatives. I would also like to recognize some of our friends who are here, who've been, everyone here is a distinguished guest, and we thank you for being here. But I do want to acknowledge Congressman Mark Meadows and Debbie Meadows. They've been good friends of the archives. Please stand. And I cannot see with these lights as to whether District Judge for District of Columbia, Beryl Howell is here or not. If Judge Howell is here, she recently swore in new citizens. Please stand, Judge Howell. Thank you. Beryl Howell. And also Senior U.S. District Judge Royce Lambeth of the District of Columbia. Thank you for being with us. Now, a special friend of one of our board members is Mayor Mary Marvin, the mayor of Bronxville, New York. welcome. And one of my pals I want to introduce, because he's not only a friend of the archives and a lover of history, but now what luck, he happens to be General Counsel of the Office of Management and Budget, Mark Paoletta. And Tricia, please, thanks for coming, please. And two other former colleagues of mine in Congress, former Congressman Tom McMillan and Congressman Charlie Dent. Please rise, please. On their way is our ambassador to Canada, U.S. Ambassador Kelly Knight Craft, and her husband Joe. And I have a feeling because they were flying in, the weather may have altered their plans. They are here now? Please stand. Where are they? All right. Thank you for coming. You've had a busy week, Ambassador. Got a new treaty. And I think a good one. We want to thank our leader, our world-renowned National Archivist, David Ferriero, for welcoming us to his home. Thank you, David. We also want to welcome and thank tonight's sponsors, AT&T, Edgeworth Economics, and David M. Rubenstein, who have always showed us strong support, and we deeply appreciate it. Thank you. So tonight we present our highest honor to Laura Bush in recognition of her lifelong commitment to civic education and literacy. This is a subject very near and dear to the hearts of our board members and our National Archives and our archivists. In fact, along with the archives, we aboard the foundation are working on a plan to dramatically expand civic education and engagement, so stay tuned for more of that. But our awardee tonight, Laura Bush, has shared her love of literature with children and adults from all walks of life, from her work as a teacher and a librarian to her work as First Lady, and that at the George W. Bush Center. Laura Bush has demonstrated the power of a good story to captivate and inspire. Here at the National Archives, we too understand the power of a good story, which is why we work so hard to tell the story of our nation. And so we look forward to this program tonight. So now I would like to welcome, it's my pleasure, the leader of our archives, the man who has opened his doors this evening to all of us. Please join me in welcoming our world-renowned and friend, the Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero.
Thank you, Jim, and good evening all, and welcome to my house as we honor former First Lady Laura Bush. And those of you who have been at the last couple of award ceremonies have come to appreciate my demonstration of socks. So tonight we have a special Laura Bush version of the socks. Which are special librarian socks, available in our shop, by the way, and online. You can order them online. But I'm delighted to recognize a fellow librarian. And you may be surprised to learn how much we have in common. We studied for our master's in library science at the same time, relocated to Washington for executive branch positions on Pennsylvania Avenue, and both proudly champion our nation's history. But in all seriousness, First Lady Laura Bush's unwavering support of civic literacy, her passion for education, and her unyielding commitment to the empowerment of women make her both an obvious choice for this award and for the launch of our Women's Vote Centennial celebration. Laura Bush has been an educator, a librarian, the First Lady of Texas, the First Lady of the United States, and a global advocate through the George W. Bush Presidential Center. The common thread linking her life's work together is this intrinsic love of learning that she continues to share with the world. Laura Bush's educational work through the Bush Center in programs such as Middle School Matters, the School Leadership Initiative, Advancing Accountability in Education, and of course my favorite, your Foundation for America's Libraries, all demonstrate a commitment and passion for ensuring a literate society. This mission was what President Franklin Roosevelt had in mind when he created the National Archives, a mission which continues to be vital to our democracy. Laura Bush said, "We must prepare our children and grandchildren with the tools they need to be informed, engaged citizens who care about individual liberty and democracy. We must teach them history. We must insist they understand the government they are blessed to live under. We must teach our children to listen, to show empathy, to show civility in the face of disagreement, and to overcome malice and hate. And we must model the behavior ourselves." At the National Archives, we work to provide students of all ages with the tools they need to understand history and become active participants in our government. We recently launched the Civic Education webpage to make our education initiatives accessible to parents, teachers, and students. Docs Teach, our online tool for teaching with documents, features more than 10,000 primary source documents and interactive activities for teachers and students. We make history fun with sleepovers in the rotunda upstairs. Coming up this weekend, as a matter of fact, Saturday night, our latest, with a theme of Native Americans. And we host a variety of educational programs across the country throughout the year. We would not be here tonight if it wasn't for our partner, the National Archives Foundation, helping the National Archives reach an ever larger and more diverse audience. Together, we make civic literacy a reality. With the support of the Foundation and generous benefactors like you, we celebrated our fourth of July reading of the Declaration of Independence on the steps of this building. We hosted 2 widely popular National Archives sleepovers, and we'll launch our next exhibit, Rightfully Hers, this March on the 19th Amendment and women's right to vote in the Lawrence F. O'Brien Gallery. Tonight, we celebrate this shared vision between Laura Bush and the National Archives family. Through the work of the former First Lady, the National Archives, and the National Archives Foundation, we're striving for a nation in which all children have the same love of learning that drove Laura Bush to pursue her dreams and make the world a better place. Thank you for joining us this evening as we celebrate our public-private partnership with the Foundation and pay tribute to Laura Bush.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present our 2018 Records of Achievement honoree, Laura Bush. Please. And we are joined by the Vice Chair of our National Archives Foundation, the best Vice Chair anyone could ever have, Cokie Roberts. All right. They're going to have a conversation, but I get to say a couple more things. All right. We give this award each year. It's special. We try to make the award something of special significance to the honoree. And we understand that Laura Ingalls Wilder is one of our honoree's favorite authors. In 2017, Laura Bush wrote, in the hot, and I quote, "In the hot, arid lands of West Texas, I tried to imagine being surrounded by tall pine trees and heavy snow. And of course, I identified with the main character, a brown-haired girl named Laura." The 2018 Records of Achievement Award features a handwritten insert by Laura Ingalls Wilder to a typescript draft of her 5th Little House novel, By the Shores of Silver Lake. This insert was added to an early draft attempting to explain how Mary, Laura's older sister, had become blind in the intervening time period since On the Banks of Plum Creek. These are books, by the way, I have not read, but obviously I don't know what to, but a lot of people have. This insert is part of the collection of the Rose Wilder Lane papers at the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum. And so, what you've been waiting for now, our journalist, best-selling author, historian in her own right, and our vice chair, Cokie Roberts, will now have a conversation with Laura Bush about her contributions to our society. We thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. I did love the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. And so this is a really wonderful gift. Thank you very, very much. I'm thrilled with it. Thanks a lot.
Two more introductions before we start. Many of your former staff members are here. That's right. So would you all please stand? We won't see you, but
we have Anita, who was in the video.
Look at all of them.
Oh, here they are.
There they all are.
Thank you all. Great.
And of course, you know how important they are to the work you've done. And the man you convinced to start the National Book Festival, Jim Billington, the longtime Librarian of Congress.
He was my partner in the National Book Festival. Thank you so much, Dr. Billington.
And Marjorie Billington.
He knew I'd started the Texas Book Festival, and he called me right after we moved to the White House and said, let's have a National Book Festival. So thank you, Dr. Billington, very much. Appreciate it.
So we all want to know.
How was the wedding?
How was the wedding? And also, I have to tell you, as a reporter, keeping it secret, not good. But how did you manage that?
Well, I think Barbara just kept it a secret. Plus, so few people were invited. It was just our family and Craig's family. And it didn't include Jeb or Neil or any of those other uncles. So it was just really just our family. She wanted to get married there because that's where her grandfather is. And she wanted to be with him. And so we had a wedding outside looking at the ocean. And then we went in and had dinner at the dining room table. There were 20 of us at the dining room table. So it was just perfect. So it was Barbara and Craig, her new husband, who we like a lot, and his family and our family. And the little flower girls were Mila, Jenna's little girl, and Emma, Craig's niece, and the ring bearer was Poppy, who was very proud of being a ring bearer. During of course, the box was empty because they knew that she couldn't really have the ring. So Craig had it in his pocket.
Poppy is the baby.
Poppy's the baby, the 3-year-old. But so during the entire ceremony, she walked around with the ring box to show it to everyone. Anyway, it was very, very sweet.
Actually, my nephew did lose my ring.
The ring, exactly.
My wedding. And it was actually found by President Johnson's doctor with the little ear light. So
it was a lot of fun. We had a wonderful time. It was just this weekend. George and I just flew from Maine yesterday morning to Washington.
Well, congratulations to everyone, and we were all very pleased to see it, but as I say, secret. And I was just with you and your daughters and their cousins in Dallas honoring Barbara Bush's literacy heritage, and we had a panel of the grandchildren, which was hysterical. But one of the things they revealed when you talk about going in for lunch is that you used to have in Kennebunkport Taco Sundays with Barbara Bush. And then she died, and the kids...
As soon as she died, we started having hamburger and hot dog Sundays. President Bush said he never had liked those tacos.
All those years he had put up with them. So the last time I think you were on this stage, at least the last time I was with you on this stage, you were here with Michelle Obama, which you've done several times. And I want to come back to that in a little bit. But first I want to talk about First Ladies in general, because, you know, we kind of danced around it a little bit in the video, but it is such an interesting role and an important role, and one that the American people are always kind of nervous about, you know. You've got a lot of power. You can't be fired. They they don't know what you're up to, you know, unless except what you choose to tell them, right? And therefore, we create our own kind of stories about a first lady. And you said, and I'm quoting you here, our first ladies are much more complicated than they ever get treated in the media. And I think what happens is a story goes up about them, a myth that people stick to for all coverage of them forever after. And you felt that
And
happen.
of course,
with them.
I was the quiet reader and librarian.
Right, right.
And I was that. I mean, that, you know, there's no doubt about it. But all of our first ladies have been a lot more complicated and have been very constructive for our country from the very beginning.
From the very beginning. One of the great myths that, you know, they were sitting around pouring tea until Eleanor Roosevelt or something, you know, makes me crazy. But so you've just had at the Bush Center, which is the library part of it is part of the National Archives, a First Lady's special exhibit. Please tell me it wasn't about dresses.
There were a few gowns in it, but no, it was not about dresses, and we didn't want it to be about dresses. People love to come see the dresses, and we had a dress show earlier when the library first opened with some of Nancy Reagan's clothes, but we wanted this to be substantive because we knew that besides wearing lovely gowns, that our first ladies had made so many contributions to our country. So one gown that was there, though, that I think is interesting was a mock-up of a gown that Dolly Madison made out of the red velvet drapes that she saved from the White House when the British burned the White House.
Where's it been saved?
Well, no, this was a copy.
Copy.
It was a copy of it, so I think the dress was not saved.
Not saved.
But we talked about the contributions that each First Lady had made. It was a show that we did ourselves that the Bush Library curators came up with. And this does give me the chance to thank the National Archives because, of course, the National Archives administer the President's papers. The President's papers are seen as belonging to the people of the United States, and the archives administer those papers. So the National Archives is a very important part of the Bush Library, the museum part, and then, of course, the storage of all the papers that are there at the Bush Library. And so I want to thank the National Archives and the archivists and everyone here for your work. And of course, those employees at the Bush Library are employees, they're archivists that are employees of the government.
Right. So you talk about the role that First Ladies played, and again, you said, and you had a very interesting kind of session with those of us who are historians, et cetera, as you were leaving the White House. So I've written down every word.
Yeah, sure.
And you said, every time I spoke out about something, even heart disease, I would be surprised again at how many people heard me. And I often use Lady Bird Johnson's quote about the First Lady has a podium. And while she was here, she said, I've decided to use it. And you quoted her often about that, and you did. You did take that to heart, deciding to use it.
That's right, and of course we knew Lady Bird. She was a Texas First Lady, and when she opened the Wildflower Center at the close to outside of Austin, we hosted. George was governor, and we hosted on the lawn of the governor's mansion the picnic for the opening of the Wildflower Center, and then went out that night to the opening gala of the National Wildflower Center. And I always really admired Lady Bird Johnson because she thought the way we were, all of us, and our landscape everywhere around our country was enough. And it was beautiful as it was naturally.
Except
and I
the
like
billboards.
that.
She didn't like the billboards.
No billboards, and that was very difficult to get
Right.
rid of. In fact, I think only 2 states actually managed it to not have billboards anymore. I was with the governor of Vermont, lone Republican in Vermont, when George ran for president the first time, and he said that they had stayed in suits until just recently to be able to outlaw billboards.
But you then started using that podium at first for things that you had done before, the book festival, literacy. You did a big conference on cognitive development in early childhood. and on your way to the Capitol to testify before the Senate Education Committee. Why people thought you were not out there, I don't know. You heard that the first plane had crashed into the World Trade Center.
That's right. So everything that I'd done up to that, the National Book Festival had been that weekend before September 11th. We'd hosted our first state dinner for Mexico, which is where we were obviously neighbors of Mexico and Texas. We expected our, all of our interest in other countries to be centered around our hemisphere and Mexico. All those things had happened, and then I was on Capitol Hill in Senator Ted Kennedy's office about to brief his Senate Committee on Early Childhood Education when we got the word that the planes had flown into the World Trade Center. And we thought, of course, when we heard the first one that it was some odd accident, and then when we heard the second one, we knew it was not an accident. So then, of course, everything changed for me. And the things I'd expected to work on, I still did work on. But then I added other things, like supporting Afghan women and our military, things that I'd never expected really to work on. I'd made a 6th grade report on Afghanistan. I never expected to actually go to Afghanistan.
Now, I'm surprised because your name was Welch. I had to do Afghanistan, but that's because my name was Boggs. It was the top of the alphabet.
Picked it. I picked the country myself. We got to pick the countries.
But you then really took it on. Well, first of all, I should say, by the way, that Mrs. Bush and Senator Kennedy were together pretty much all day as you were trying to figure out what was going on. And Senator Kennedy later said, you get to know somebody in a situation like that. And he said she was steady, assured, and elegant.
That was sweet. Well, he kept up a steady stream of small talk. And he showed me everything on his office walls. He read me a letter that his brother Jack had written to their mother that said, Teddy is getting fat. And he laughed at it. And I never knew if that was the way he had to deal with the trauma, because he'd had so many in his life, or if he thought I'd fall apart. And so he just felt like he had to keep up this, small talk. And then Senator Judd Gregg, who was the minority chairman of the Education Committee, joined us from New Hampshire, and one of our best friends, still one of our best friends. We see him a lot. We're going to see him and have dinner with him next weekend when they'll be in Dallas. His son has moved to Fort Worth. And Judd and I would sort of look at each other while Senator Kennedy talked and told stories and told us things about his office. And so I don't know if he did it because that was just the way he reacted, or if he thought he needed to for me.
Right.
But anyway, then we went out to talk to the press and tell them that obviously the briefing had been canceled, postponed. We were already, you're not going to stop us. We're going to do it later. And he changed his whole personality, became very serious and perfect for the press, really, under the circumstances. And then I did brief the Senate committee a couple of months later.
But you said, I grew in both my realization that I had a podium, but also in my expertise about some international issues that I didn't come to the White House with. And that really did change a lot of your focus. And you went to Afghanistan, I think, 3 times when you were in the White House, and you took on more and more. I think you went to 76 countries.
That's right. I visited 76 countries.
While you were First Lady, going to Africa, Asia, the Middle East. PEPFAR was very much part of your portfolio, saving millions and millions of lives in Africa. Malaria, talking about breast cancer in the Middle East where it wasn't talked about, so it couldn't be treated. Heart disease, all of it.
Gosh, I did a lot.
You did a lot. And actually, that was a great dress exhibit, the First Lady's red dress exhibit on heart disease. But you did also, and this was one that always just gobsmacked me, I have to say, take on the military government of Burma. Big time.
I did. I was a secret friend of Aung San Suu Kyi. where I could send her things. And I would get messages of things she wanted, like seaweed. I think she liked to eat seaweed or drink seaweed or something. And I would always send her a book that I liked, that I thought maybe she would like. So during all those years, I had this friendship with Aung San Suu Kyi and would send her various items and paid a lot of attention to her. And then finally, when we left, she was under house arrest for all those years. By the time we left, she had been able to be the leader of Burma. But now, as we're watching, we don't know what to think with the Rohingyas. I don't know if the military, who always really were the ones that were in power during the whole time, even though she'd been elected president. I don't know if it's a military thing and she's compromised by the military. Right. I'm not sure, because now I'm not in contact with her anymore.
Yeah. But you went to the press room, the briefing room. You were on your way to Jenna's wedding, as I recall. Had a few things to do on the home front, but went into the press room. Now, no First Lady's ever done that before or since. You grabbed the microphone and basically used it to denounce the military rule in Burma, because they were not responding to a cyclone where they had not even accepted American aid. And yet you were described as prim. So how do you account for that?
No, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it is how we treat First Ladies, in the Little First Lady Nice.
Right. Bless her heart.
Does she make cookies? We really think about Lady Bird Johnson, who was one of the founders of an environmental movement. But people said, isn't that nice that she likes flowers?
She hated the word beautification, in fact. But you kept at it after you left office, of keeping these causes going, particularly Afghan women, but also in Africa. And I want to come back to you and Michelle Obama together, because you had convened First Ladies of Africa Summit, which in itself was just wildly interesting. But then you discovered that the Obamas just happened to be on the continent at the same time as you, and you invited Mrs. Obama to come.
Well, that's one of the things we've done through the Bush Library, and that is this First Ladies Initiative, working with First Ladies who, in many cases, in many parts of the world, don't have the sort of platform that American First Ladies have. And we've worked with First Ladies to give them the chance to build that kind of platform, because they can work on issues that their husbands aren't working on. And the very first thing we did was an African First Ladies Conference when we were in Africa. And we work with the First Ladies themselves, but also our staff work with their staffs to try to figure out ways they can set up their offices so that the First Ladies can be more effective. Because when you have both leaders, the husband and the wife, working, you can do twice as much. So the first African First Ladies Conference, we hosted in Africa, and Michelle Obama was there, so she could come to it.
Well, it was better than that. Because I had the great honor of being the person to interview the two of them together. I got a call from the Bush Center saying, "Can you be in Tanzania next week?" And I said no. And then my husband said, "Why not?" So off I went, and first of all, it was to see this.
They would never, and they for them, because they were have that continuity that we have with our form. It is kind of like a club, just like the National Governors Association gives you the chance to be with other governors and their spouses, and gives you a chance to know what's going on. It's really very helpful, I think, for First Ladies to be together. And I think it's a great example, both for Americans to see and for other people in other countries to see.
But I remember when I asked at that point, because you had basically said to Mrs. Obama, come and do whatever you want to do, right? You can make a speech, you can, and she could have hijacked it, frankly, right?
She wouldn't have.
No, I know, and you knew that, and she wanted to be in a conversation with you. And I said, as I was having the conversation, Mrs. Obama, you wanted to be in this conversation with Mrs. Bush. Why? And she reached out her hand to you and said, I love this woman. And it was such a moment of just, making you feel good about the country. And then you did it again here the following year and brought the African First Ladies here.
During the UNGA in New York, when their spouses were in New York for the General Assembly. We hosted it then.
And then you and Mrs. Obama did an event here, I think just this year. Or was it last year? 2 years. Oh my goodness, time flies. This is what happens when you get old. You think it was 5 minutes.
She was First Lady.
But it was on military spouses, right? And so do you continue that work together?
No, not really, not since they left. I mean, it doesn't mean we wouldn't at some time continue to do something together, but not really. We've mainly seen them, as you know, at funerals.
Where there was, press about the fact that President Bush gave
her an Altoid.
That was considered, I don't know what.
I don't know why that was so fascinating.
But you do say that there is this bond among First Ladies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everyone knows, the First Ladies know what it's like, and they're friendly with each other. Maybe they wouldn't be friendly if they'd run against each other. But
although the presidents end up being friends, too.
Yeah, the presidents do, too.
I mean, I remember actually interviewing President Bush 41 soon after he left office. And he said, I can't imagine that I'll ever be friends with Clinton the way that Ford and Carter are. And then he became a fifth son.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, that also speaks to how President Bush is, which is so great, and he's so courtly, and he's so, that's just how he is, that he would be friends with anyone. He would never have a feud with somebody that beat him in some race.
Mrs. Bush might have.
I might have, yeah. Or Barr would have, for sure.
Right.
Not really. She wouldn't either. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about Barr.
Okay, let's do that.
I wanted to tell you all some things about her. One thing at her funeral, which was perfect. I don't know if you all watched it. I think it was televised, but she had planned it all, and it was really great. And she got to do what no one else really gets to do. She had put out the word that she was not going to have any more treatment. And so everyone started writing her obituaries before she died. And so she got to read them. And they were all, of course, very laudatory. And then she'd ask John Meacham if he would talk at her funeral, and he called her and he said, Barr, I've got my talk ready. Do you want to hear it? So I hope she got to hear it all. She probably was in so much pain then that she didn't really care anymore and was ready to go on. But anyway, it was when we had the funeral in Houston at their church, St. Martin's. Then we drove to College Station, where their gravesite is, at the Bush Presidential Library at Texas A&M University. So we drove there, and we had a police escort, and they just would stop the cars at the access roads before they got on. They didn't really hold up a lot of traffic, but we'd look down at the access roads, and those Texans would be out of their cars, and those Texas men would have their cowboy hats over their hearts. It was really, really sweet. And then when we got to Texas A&M, we walked with the casket by 700 saluting Texas A&M cadets.
Fabulous.
It was really lovely. And it was perfect for
It was
Barr.
Perfect. It was perfect in every way. I mean, I was covering it on television and, weeping my way through, but happy tears because it was.
She was ready to go. And
well, tell the story that she told your husband about.
Well, so George called her. We had seen her. She had fallen. And we'd been in Houston. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia had come to the U.S., and so he wanted to meet with George and his dad, so we went to Houston and had lunch with him. He has ended up being slightly we're kind of worried about him now. But anyway, so while Bar was in the hospital because she'd fallen, so George and I went by to see her. So when we got the word that she was not going to have any more treatment, we didn't try to go down to Houston to see her. I think that all the other kids did, but we had just seen her. And so George called her and said, "Mother, you were a wonderful mother, and I'm so glad you were my mother, and thank you for everything." He said, "I love you." And she said, "Well, I love you too, George." And she said, "You're my favorite son." On the phone. So she stayed funny and quick till the end.
And told a nurse or a doctor or whatever that he turned out this way because...
Yeah, exactly. So then when we had gone to see her after we saw the Crown Prince, we didn't really realize she was about to die. Even when she said she wasn't going to have any more treatment, we just still were planning on going to Maine and where she would be, because she wouldn't, which bedroom she'd be in. And we didn't know it was really that soon. But when she was in the hospital, when George went to see her, she said, "You know what," to the doctor, "you know why George turned out the way he did?" And the doctor said, "No, why?" And she said, "Because I drank and smoked when I was pregnant with him."
She
She
never
was
missed
always
it.
bad.
She never missed it, right? So I guess we should end on a somewhat serious note about civic education, because it's something you care deeply about, and you know that our children don't learn it, and the numbers are just horrible of what people don't know, and it is wonderful when we have these naturalization ceremonies here in front of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. Those people have actually all had to learn.
Know it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we need to teach it more. I think we went through sort of a stage where we were embarrassed about ourselves, like we were trying to act like we're better or something. But the fact is, we're so lucky to have inherited the institutions that we inherited, and all the ones that support our democracy. And it's really important for people to know about them and to be proud of it. Why not be proud of it? One of the things we're working on with women from Tunisia and Egypt, and that we started with at the Bush Institute with those women from those two countries, because they were the two Arab Spring countries. But they don't have the institutions to support a democracy. And it's been very hard, and both countries have sort of slid back. And we inherited those institutions. We didn't have to do anything for them. We were just lucky to get them. And it's really important, I think, for people to know that and to know about them. The reason we can have a democracy is because we have those institutions. The free press, the independent judiciary, I mean, all the things that we have. And so I think it's important that we teach that. And we need to go back and not be embarrassed about teaching it.
And we have to get it on the test.
That's right. We need to get it on the test. And then if it's on the test, they'll teach it.
Right. No, it's true.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for all of your teaching over the many years and the wonderful work that you continue to do.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations.
And thanks
on this.
to everybody. Thank you for your support for the National Archives. I encourage you to give more to the foundation. Thank you all very, very much.
Yes. Laura and Koki, thank you for allowing us to enjoy your conversation. And Laura Bush, thank you for your service to our country and for helping build a better world. Thank you. Now, we're going to do some photos. Invite all of you as we finish the program to join us upstairs in the Rotunda Galleries for our gala dinner, our annual gala dinner. And thank you again, all of you, for coming.
Frederick Douglass is not my real name. A fugitive slave. What year I was born, I do not know. My mother and I were separated when I was still too young to know her as my mother. As a child, I knew indescribable hunger. I remember fighting with yard dogs for scraps of food, thrown away as garbage. I have often been utterly astonished to hear persons who speak of the singing of the slave as evidence of his contentment and happiness. This is a terrible mistake. The songs of the slave represent the sorrows of his heart. I've sat on Kennard's Wharf at the foot of Philpott Street in Baltimore, and I've seen men and women chained and put on a ship to go to New Orleans.
Frederick.
Still hear their cries.
Frederick, it's so early in the morning.
I'm just going through some old files and notes. I might find something interesting for the women's conference this afternoon.
They're not expecting you to make a formal speech. Will you not even have breakfast?
I won't be long. Just want to be prepared.
You said that before sunup.
I won't be long.
Very good, Fred. Go on.
G, H, I, J, K.
What in God's name do you think you're doing?
You didn't mean any harm.
If you give a nigger an inch, he will take a mile. If you teach that nigger how to read, there would be no keeping him. It would forever ruin him to be a slave. We carried you here to take care of Thomas. You'll learn a trade when you're bigger. Ain't no need for you to be reading, boy. No need at all.
I understand, dear. I'll see to it that it's not allowed to be near any more books.
There's nothing more needs saying.
I have little hope in the freedom of the slave by peaceful means. More than 2 centuries of slavery has placed the slave holders beyond the reach of moral and humane consideration. Get out! The only penetrable point of a tyrant is fear of death.
So you mean to resist me, a scoundrel?
Yes, sir. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and will. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.
Anna, I shall not marry you as a slave.
Then I reckon you should go up north.
Words come easily. If I'm caught this time, Lord knows what might happen.
But you off the plantation now, Fred. They'll patrol us to stop you in Baltimore. You learned yourself a trade in a shipyard. There's work for you up there, and freedom. I saved up some. Got some belongings I can sell. Enough for the New York train.
Anna.
See, Frederick Douglass has joined us. please, come up and share your thoughts with us.
Mr. Coffin, I'm not very used to speaking like this.
Just speak, Fred. It's all right.
Frederick Douglass is not my real name. I'm a fugitive slave. What year I was born, I do not know. My mother and I were separated when I was still I resolved then really that whatever power I had should be devoted to the freeing of my race.
My friends, have we been listening to a thing, a piece of property, or to a man? Will you allow this man to be carried back into slavery?
We'll get him started here in Massachusetts until he becomes accustomed to traveling and speaking. Mr. Douglas.
I don't believe you've met Mr. Garrison.
I'm honored, sir.
I was deeply moved by your address. You have a great gift, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison.
You say you never had any formal schooling?
No, sir.
Not even after you escaped?
No, sir. I've been teaching myself ever since I was a youngster.
Amazing.
Impressive. Really is.
Mr. Douglas, Mr. Collins and Mr. Raymond and I were just discussing your becoming an agent for the society. Traveling as a lecturer, if you will.
Mr. Garrison, I've hardly the ability to speak.
Oh, nonsense. You speak with full conviction and authority.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress. The struggle may be a moral, or it may be a physical. Within or without the Union, slavery must fall. The long-crushed Negro must rise. Ethiopia. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? There's not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Kill the nigger!
Fred, no, Fred!
No, Senator Calhoun! No! Slavery cannot last. Melancholy as the truth may be to the dealers in human flesh. No constitutional change. No legislative enactments. No human contract, no agreements can save the accursed system of human bondage from the death and decay to which God and nature have doomed it.
Bravo! Bravo!
Who is it?
Garrison.
Come in.
I must speak to your father.
Garrison.
Sorry to disturb you like this. I should have known it. The very thing we were afraid of has happened. But we never dreamed the reaction would be this great. Your book, my dear fellow. You've named your masters. You've marked yourself for the fugitive catchers, my dear man.
I had no choice. My effectiveness as a speaker was diminished. The enemies of our cause claim that I'm a fraud, that no slave could be so literate.
You've talked of taking our message to Great Britain.
Yes.
This seems a propitious time for such a journey, giving time for this trouble to blow over.
Frederick, Mr. Garrison may be right.
But Anna, that means I'll have to leave you and the children for a while.
But you still have your freedom.
So we can't persuade you to stay in England.
It's been over a year. I must go back. It's not an easy decision. The British people have taken me to their hearts.
Have you any plans, Frederick?
Oh, yes. When I get back, there'll be speeches, more speeches, meetings and more meetings. But Julia, I'm thinking of starting a newspaper. I want to call it the North Star.
If you do, I'd like to help. I could raise funds, sell
It would be a most
subscriptions here in
humanitarian
England.
deed, Miss Richardson. But I fear the reaction of our abolitionists at home.
Why should anyone object? Do you agree, Mr. Garrison?
But let's speak to Mr. Douglas.
The more that's known about slavery, the better. Don't you agree, Frederick?
Frederick, my sister and I have hired an agent who has been in contact with you all. He is willing to sell you.
Sell? To you?
Well, as soon as the transaction is completed, we can give you your freedom.
Freedom. Freedom.
Welcome home, Papa.
Hey, Rosetta. Mama. I like this. That's good, David.
Thank you very much.
Rosetta! Who's at the door, please?
Yes, Papa. Oh, Papa, it's Mrs. Tubman.
Harriet! Oh, my goodness. So good to see you.
Frederick.
Rosetta, lock the door.
Ooh, a warm stove is sure a welcome sight.
Harriet, this is my friend from England, Julia Griffiths. She's been helping to straighten out the paper's financing.
I'm so honored, Mrs. Tubman. I've heard so much about you. Even in England, your work is known.
I'm just an old lady that loves doing a lot of walking in the great outdoors. Most times at night.
And she's fond of bloodhounds, too.
Wherever I go, I hear folks talking about John Brown.
Brown, we're indebted to you for your deeds in Kansas. They say you freed over 100 slaves.
Several hundred. We escaped just ahead of the, shall we say, friendly posse. Douglas, my words are for your ears only.
What do you mean by that?
I intend to seize Harper's Ferry. I want you at my side.
Seize the town?
Yes. First, we'll capture the army arsenal. Then we'll hold the leading citizens hostage until the slaves are freed.
But don't you see, you can't fight the entire United States Army alone. You and your men are overwhelmingly outnumbered. They'll annihilate you.
But this mission will arouse all America. It will force the people to take action against this damnable institution.
John, you know I have supported and will continue to support you in all of your other efforts. But my dear friend, this scheme is doomed to failure. This is the wrong place. This is suicide, man.
Whether we live, die, this deed must be done.
Shields, for the love of God.
Mr. Douglas, I believe I'll go with the old man.
Because of events in Harper's Ferry, the press and much of the public have declared John Brown to be truly mad. But he is not. John Brown is a man who simply believes the Declaration of Independence to be true, and the Bible to be a guide to human conduct. The future will write John's epitaph. upon the hearts of a people freed from slavery. Like Samson, he laid his hands upon the pillars of this great national temple of cruelty and blood. And when he fell, that temple began to crumble to its final doom.
Mr. Douglas, a word with you, please. Come, walk with me, sir.
My name is Hearn. I'm a telegraph operator. I have in my pocket a wire that just came for the United States Marshal. It orders him to place you under arrest.
Arrest? What are the charges?
Conspiracy and accessory before the fact of murder. They plan to extradite you to Virginia to stand trial with John Brown.
But...
Mr. Douglas, I am a friend of your cause. I know that Virginia justice will surely see you go to the gallows. I'll hang on to this message until you're safely out of town.
I have to leave for Britain next month. It's been planned for some time.
Mr. Douglas, go at once.
I'll make for Canada and sail from there.
And go quickly, Mr. Douglas. And Godspeed. I must get back to my work.
Frederick, the women on the council know you've been fighting their cause for nearly half a century.
Yes. It's the men I'm trying to reach at that meeting. Many of them still aren't convinced women must have the right to vote.
Really think you can change their minds?
Perhaps. I believe I've changed a few in my time.
Oh. Frederick.
Let us stop the war on the soil upon which it originated, and among the rebels and traitors who originated.
Yes.
Organize yourselves into societies and communities. Purchase arms for yourselves. Learn how to use them.
Yes.
Let us not only be ready when called, but let us cast about for the opportunity to strike for the freedom of the slave and the rights of human nature. For we shall be called, and we must be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for consenting to this visit.
Mr. Douglas, your reputation precedes you. We appreciate your efforts in recruiting so many Negro troops. Now, tell me your concern.
To put it bluntly, Mr. President, our Negro soldiers are receiving inferior arms, inferior training, lower pay, and in other ways are being unfairly treated by the Union Army, and when captured by the Confederates, are murdered in cold blood. Mr. President, the Negro soldier is willing to fight and die in this great war. But he must receive some sign from this administration that he simply isn't exchanging one form of oppression for another.
Mr. Douglas. If this administration goes too far, we will bring down upon ourselves all of the hatred that is felt toward the Negro. This would greatly hinder our ability to successfully conclude this war. For we, both of us, have much to gain in this regard.
Let us pray that this family is never separated again.
Well, what happens now, Papa? Now that our people are free?
There are papers that supposedly set us free, Louis. But in my heart, I fear the danger that the victory that you and Charles and 170,000 other black men fought to gain will be lost.
But Papa, President Johnson says
I fear
Andrew Johnson is no friend of the Negro people.
Frederick, you mean we've been suffering all these trials for all these years for nothing?
Without the vote, liberty's a mockery. The Negro will no longer be a slave to an individual master. He will be a slave to society and at the mercy of the mob.
It is the spirit of hate, spirit of murder, spirit that would burn a family in their beds. But one thing I know, and that is, there is no middle ground for us. We must either have all the rights of American citizens, or we must be exterminated. For we shall never again be slaves.
Do you like it, Anna?
It's beautiful. Maybe a mite too grand.
Well, President Hayes wouldn't have the United States Marshal for the District of Columbia living in a log cabin.
Mr. Lincoln lived in a log cabin.
How do you feel?
About the same. What's wrong, Papa?
Nothing, my dear. Everything's fine.
What is it, Fred?
I met with President Garfield today. First, he thanked me for supporting the party. And then he informed me I'm no longer the United States Marshal. I'm to be appointed the Recorder of Deeds. Glorified clerk.
Lincoln never took a step backward, but every administration since has. Papa, you're not going to take that job, are you?
Is there a choice? Our people's pride demands that a Negro holds some position in the government of the United States. I must put their battered pride ahead of my own.
You've done the right thing, Fred. You usually do. Papa. Papa, come in and see.
Harriet!
Frederick!
My goodness. My goodness. What a pleasant surprise.
I can't stay but a moment. But I couldn't come to Washington without stopping by to say hello.
It's been so long, Harriet. It brings back such pleasant memories. You know, Harriet, most of what I've done in my life has been in public. But you've labored in a private way. I've had the applause of the crowds, while your greater deeds have been known by only a few trembling, scared, footsore bondsmen. Midnight sky and silent stars. witnesses to your heroism.
Old age sure ain't tarnished that silver tongue of yours. You must be terribly lonely, Frederick. With Anna gone and all the children grown up now.
Lonely? Harriet, Anna was the anchor of my life for 40 years. But I have Rosetta, Charles, Louis, Fred, and I had my work.
I hope this is hot enough for you.
Thank you, Rosetta. Miss Fitz,
Yes, Mr. Douglas?
do you have the file on the Ramsey properties?
I'll get it.
Thank you. Miss Fitz,
Yes, Mr. Douglas.
I understand you enjoy bars, is that so?
Very much, Mr. Douglas.
Perhaps you wouldn't mind accompanying me to the concert tonight.
I'd be happy to. I'll have to get back to my correspondence.
Papa, I speak for the entire family. How could you do such a terrible thing?
Rosetta, is it so terrible for an old man to seek the comfort of a loving wife as the evening of his days descend upon him?
But you are not just anybody, Papa. You are the leader of our people. What kind of example is this? If you insist on marrying at your age, why turn your back on our women to marry this hussy?
That's nonsense, Rosetta. Black or white, male or female, we all have the right to follow the convictions of our hearts. If I were not to marry Helen simply because she happens to be white, go to my grave a self-accused and self-convicted moral coward. Rosetta, please, don't desert me.
Oh, Papa, really?
Rosetta, please.
Absolutely. I just found it.
It's a wonderful speech.
Wonderful.
Here he is.
Oh, where? Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is.
May I have your signature, sir?
Thank you.
May I have your autograph, sir?
I really enjoyed your speech, sir. It was very moving. Thank you. May I have your autograph, sir?
Thank you for those wonderful words, Mr. Douglas.
Thanks. Thank you.
They mean a lot to all of us.
Mr. Douglas, how would you sum up your involvement in the women's cause?
When I ran away from slavery, it was for myself. When I advocated emancipation, it was for my people. But when I stood up for the rights of women, self was out of the question. And I found a little nobility in the act.
Well spent.
Hello, Mr. Douglas.
Hello.
I'm Martin Andrew. I heard you speak last week at Mountain Olive.
Oh, yes. That was an inspiring affair.
Can I talk to you for a moment, Mr. Douglas?
Well, Martin, I've just left one meeting. I barely have time for supper before I have to go off to another. Why don't you stop back by tomorrow afternoon? I'll have more than just a moment.
But I just have one question.
All right, just one.
But, sir, you lived in the old days when our people were slaves. And in the new times, both. But it seems like all those rights that we're supposed to have won are being taken away from us. What advice would you have for a young fella like me who wants all people to live in liberty and justice?
Agitate, Martin. Agitate. Agitate. Agitate.
If there is no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be a moral, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. I have little hope in the freedom of the slave by peaceful means. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance place the slave holder. Why did you invite me here to speak on this occasion? To mock me? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? Within or without the Union, slavery must fall. The long-crushed Negro must rise. More than all the other days of the year. No! Justice and cruelty. No slavery cannot last. Melancholy
The old slaveholders usually represent the slaves. The rich landowners of other countries represent the poor. And the men in our country.
It's hardly necessary for me to say, after what I've already said, that I'm a radical woman suffrage man.
Slavery is the common enemy of all mankind. One of those monsters of darkness with whom the light of truth is death.
Stepped upon the free soil of Massachusetts.
Let us never forget
when I took
that justice to the Negro is safety to the nation.
It's not often that you have the chance to be part of something truly historic. I'm Pam Elam, president of Monumental Women, and we're proud that our all-volunteer not-for-profit group has broken the bronze ceiling. It has taken 7 years, and we've raised $1.5 million in private funding. We've fought through many obstacles, but on August 26, 2020, our Women's Rights Pioneers Monument honoring Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton will be unveiled on Literary Walk in New York City's Central Park. It will be the first statue of real women in the park's 167-year history. The park has statues of Alice in Wonderland, Mother Goose, and Juliet, with Romeo, of course. It has statues of witches, nymphs, and angels, but no statues of real women existed until now. As you know, August 26, 2020 is the centennial anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Votes for Women Amendment to the United States Constitution. In 2020, we also celebrate the 200th birthday of Susan B. Anthony. Truth, Anthony, and Stanton were all New Yorkers and contemporaries fighting for equality and justice. They often spoke on the same stages and attended the same meetings. It is only fitting that they share the same pedestal. But creating the Women's Rights Pioneers Monument is only one of the goals of Monumental Women. In addition, we seek to increase awareness and appreciation of women's history through our education campaign, as well as our challenge to municipalities across the nation. We urge those municipalities to reimagine their public spaces, to include tributes to the diverse women who helped create and inspire those cities. Little did we know that over the past 7 years, we would have to constantly challenge our own municipality. But we persisted. We are grateful for every contribution, large or small, from our many friends. Heartfelt thanks go to the New York Life Insurance Company for its extremely generous $500,000 challenge grant, the Ford Foundation, the American Express Foundation, and other businesses and foundations. We sincerely appreciate the money donated from cookie sales by Girl Scout troops 3484, 3482, and 3746, as well as bake sale contributions from children at the Brooklyn Mary McDowell Friends School. We received donations from over 1,000 supporters. Thanks to everyone.
It's about a movement. It's about the largest nonviolent revolution in this country's history when over half the population was enfranchised. It's an instant history lesson. It's an examination of how social change comes about. It's learning from the past to do a better job of fighting for equality and justice in the future. It's challenging municipalities all across this country and all across this world to honor all the people who made their cities great by including tributes to women and people of color in their public spaces. But most of all, it's about completing the journeys toward justice of the valiant women who came before us and achieving the full equality for women that they were denied. It's about the incredible power of moving history forward. And as Heather mentioned, when I was 13, I made my first public speech about a woman's place in the United States. It won't surprise you to know that I have been talking about that subject ever since. And I well remember when I was the age of the young Girl Scouts here, I repeatedly searched for information about women's history in my school library. I found one book, and it included chapters on a few famous women. One of those chapters was about Susan B. Anthony, and it opened a door of inspiration for me that I gratefully walked through. There was no internet, no photocopier, so I wrote every word of that chapter out so I could keep it with me forever. That's been over 50 years ago, and I still have it. That was my introduction to the power of women's history. And Susan B. Anthony has always been my North Star, my beacon in the darkness. And I want other little girls and women to find theirs. One chapter in one book, one statue in one park can change the way you see the world and your place in it. Monumental change is coming. Thank you for being a part of it.
Some of you may also be surprised to learn that the Statue Fund was required by the Parks Department to find evidence of Stanton and Anthony actually being in Central Park. I found the evidence. And you know I would. As we know, it took 72 years of fierce struggle for women to win the right to vote. Women were not granted the right to vote. They fought like hell for it. Yes. We want to tell the complex, compelling, and complete women's suffrage story. And to tell that story, we recognize the importance of launching a Votes for Women educational campaign to accompany the unveiling of the monument on Women's Equality Day, August 26, 2020. And you're all invited, by the way. We're committed to fighting for the creation of a full and fair historical record that finally includes the vast and varied roles women and people of color have played in it. With the creation of this monument, New York City can again lead the way, but no one can expect that one statue will meet all the needs and desires of so many people who have been waiting so long for it. But our statue project represents a long overdue beginning, and the timing is right. We hope that our effort will encourage others around the country and around the world to honor the women who inspire them in whatever ways they feel appropriate. But today in New York, we celebrate not only 100 years of women voting, but also a new awareness in this city of the importance of women's history and the continuing fight for women's equality.
Something's missing from parks and landmarks all across America. Can you guess what it is? Maybe Faith Saley can help.
If you are among the millions of visitors to New York City's Central Park each year, you've seen the statues that dot the landscape. Shakespeare, Alexander Hamilton, Christopher Columbus. So, who's missing?
How can you have statues of men everywhere, and the only statues of women are Mother Goose, Alice in Wonderland? We needed real women.
That's right. There are 22 statues of men and one dog who is, you guessed it, male.
The women who have played such a vital part of history are invisible until now.
Pam Elam and Colleen Jenkins run the Monumental Women campaign, and their effort hasn't exactly been a walk in the park.
They said immediately no. There will be no new statues in Central Park. It's a historical collection. No. We persisted. Then they said, well, can you pick another park? And do you really want a statue? How about a nice garden? We persisted.
And if you think the lack of statues honoring women is a rarity, think again. Nationwide, there are more than 5,000 outdoor statues of people of all sorts, but estimates show fewer than 400 of them are of women.
3 women who made history as pioneers for women's rights are about to do it again. They're becoming the first statues to depict real women in Central Park. Today, CBS 2 got an exclusive tour of the artist's studio in Connecticut. CBS 2's Andrea Klein-Thomas reports.
They say they're breaking the bronze ceiling by creating the first ever statue of real women for one of New York City's most iconic parks. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Sojourner Truth will sit along Literary Walk in the mall come August 2020.
We have to reimagine our public spaces. So many people have walked through Central Park so long and not even noticed real women were missing.
The nonprofit Monumental Women fought for the city's approval almost 7 years ago. Now, with the help of Ridgefield, Connecticut-based sculptor Meredith Bergman and her assistants, its efforts are nearing completion. The towering monument stands 14 feet tall and should be finished any day now.
It's important that they be much larger than life because they were, and they need to pop forward from history and inspire us now.
Anthony, Stanton, and Truth were chosen because of their victories in the fight for women's suffrage, women's civil rights, and the abolition of slavery. Bergman hopes her latest artwork not only celebrates these women, but inspires future leaders and educates the public.
We are making history. Monumental Women and me as a sculptor, and hopefully more sculptors for future projects are bringing women into the forefront again.
The statue will be unveiled next August, marking the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in the United States. As of right now, there are only a handful of female statues in the 166-year-old park, all depicting fictional women. Andrea Klein-Thomas, CBS 2 News.
To donate a work of art to the City of New York, you must first send a letter of intent to the Parks Department, which we did in early 2014. Then we were off on a bureaucratic roller coaster which traveled through not only the Parks Department, but also the Central Park Conservancy, the Public Design Commission, the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and every single community board surrounding Central Park. Through this often bumpy ride, we had the strong support of Manhattan's great borough president, Gail Brewer. We can't thank Gail enough. Step by step, meeting by meeting, argument by argument, we crossed the minefield, which is New York City government bureaucracy. With the help of our project management team from the highly respected firm of Beyer Blinder Bell, we made progress. You might think that New York City government, having 150 statues of men and only 5 statues of women in its public spaces, might welcome our effort, especially since it was privately funded. Not so much. But again, we persisted. With the hard work of our board, additional support from the public, and more attention from the media, Monumental Women succeeded in gaining all the necessary approvals. Finally, sculptor Meredith Bergman could finish her work.
needs to be a little more of a channel. This I'm also wondering if it could blend in a little more.
Meredith Bergman is putting the final touches on a monumental project.
These are very small subtleties, but they all help give the illusion that the thing is real or better than reality.
No detail is being overlooked on this statue because the women depicted and all of the pioneering women who came before and after them have been overlooked for far too long, says Bergman.
My hope is that people will take away the fact of the neglect of women's achievements, the fact that there were women's achievements, and I hope that people of all ages will become far more curious about what has happened.
When it's unveiled this spring, Elizabeth Cady Stanton discussing women's suffrage in the 1860s, it will break the so-called bronze ceiling as the first and only statue of historical women in Central Park. There are 23 monuments honoring men.
The sad thing that so many people for so many years didn't even notice real women were missing. What does that say about the discrimination that women face, or the lack of role models for young girls and young boys, and just a fair representation of history?
Pam Elam is the president of Monumental Women, an all-volunteer group that formed 7 years ago to fight for a women's rights statue and promote an educational campaign. The group raised $1.5 million to pay for the sculpture.
We're moving history forward.
Bergman, who also created the Boston Women's Memorial, was chosen as the project sculptor in July 2018. Since then, she and her team of assistants have been working to mold it into a 14-foot-tall reality.
This is the fastest I've done a monument at this scale.
While the design originally included just Anthony and Stanton, truth was later added to give it a layer of diversity.
This scene is supposed to convey working together in complementary ways, including discussions, arguments, reinforcement, inspiration, and that women, children, minorities, people who are ignored can achieve change by working together.
A 3D printer helped bring the sculpture from a model to full scale, and in the coming weeks, molds will be cast from the clay, which will then be used to create the final bronze version.
It's majestic, and when people look at it, how can they not feel a connection, a respect, and the ability to go forward and do these women honor by continuing the fight for equality.
The monument will officially be unveiled on August 26, which will be the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. In Ridgefield, Connecticut, I'm Stacey Delacat, Fox 5 News.
All right. I think about what it would have meant to me as a child to see this monument, to know these histories. I think about the size of it, the scale of it, where it will be, and who it will affect. And I am incredibly moved to have been chosen to add this to New York City.
Sculptor Meredith Bergman recognizes the honor of creating the first statue of women in New York's Central Park. Bergman's monument to 3 leaders in the fight for women's rights, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Sojourner Truth, will take its place among the 23 statues of men and 2 fictional women, Mother Goose and Alice in Wonderland, currently in the park.
This monument is a contemporary evocation of the 19th century monument that should have been built for these women and wasn't. And that's part of why it's being allowed to be erected in Central Park, which is full of 19th century monuments to great men, but none to great women.
It's taken 6 years for the statue to become a reality. The effort was spearheaded by the nonprofit Monumental Women, which has raised $1.5 million to fund the statue. The idea initially met opposition from park officials, who balked at putting any more statues in the 166-year-old park.
So we said, could you show me where that's written? Is it a law or a regulation or some sort of codification of there shall be no other statues? And of course they couldn't, because they made it up as they went along.
Final approval was granted in October after several redesigns and the addition of Sojourner Truth, an escaped slave and women's rights activist. The monumental task of creating the 9-foot-tall statue has put Bergman on a tight timeline.
Working backward from August 2020, when they are to be unveiled, We need a number of weeks for installation, 4 to 6 months for bronze castings, which means 6 months for bronze casting, and then a month for mold making. I have to finish these by the end of this month.
The monument will be dedicated on August 26, 2020, marking the 100th anniversary of American women winning the right to vote. Joseph Frederick, Associated Press, New York.
Susan B. Anthony will be 9 feet tall, so this head will be 14 feet up in the air. Sojourner Truth needs a little more aging in her face. I am the sculptor of the Women's Rights Pioneers Monument for Central Park. Today I'm working on hands, and I'm building out the fingers to show the pressure of the pen. These kinds of details really make the sculpture vivid. This began over 6 years ago with a group called Monumental Women that formed to change the lack of representation of women in public statuary and monuments. And they petitioned the city to give them a site in Central Park for statues of women's rights pioneers. The women depicted in the monument are Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. These 3 women were very important to the stature, the rights, the citizenship that we as women enjoy today. Susan B. Anthony's traveling bag. She would arrive at Stanton's house with her bag crammed with injustices. A lot of statuary just shows a figure standing, and that has never interested me. I want to tell a story, I want to show a moment. So they're sitting at a table, maybe hammering out a speech, maybe working on a piece of legislation, maybe having an argument. I want it to be up to the viewer to decide. So you're never going to see her like this. You're going to see her from below, tilted down, more like that. I want the piece to be in depth, so that as you pass it day after day, or as you visit it once a year, there's more to see, there's more to discover. So there is detail hidden everywhere in the sculpture, and a lot of it has meaning. Sojourner Truth often had herself photographed with her knitting in her lap, because knitting was a patriotic occupation during the Civil War. It was actually necessary to provide clothing, but it was also a skill, I have read, that was not taught to slaves, and she wanted to work among the newly freed slaves and the escaped slaves and show them herself as an example of what they could become, skilled, involved, with rights, and hopefully eventually. The statues would be 2020, which is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, when it actually became law that women could vote. And it'll be right in the park, on the site, on the Central Park Mall, where the statue will go. I can't even begin to say what it means to me, but I've lived in New York City for over 40 years. I love the city. I spent a great deal of time in Central Park with my son as a baby, as a child. It's been a refuge and an inspiration to see the statuary there. And
As we all know, through the gift of women's history, we discover an historical treasure chest overflowing with the stories of women who serve to inspire and energize us. We learn of their strategies and tactics in the battle for equality. We learn of their courage and their imperfections. We look at the totality of their lives. We build on their work. We honor their memories. We vow to complete their journeys. A knowledge of women's history helps us understand the context of the struggle for equality, as well as the continuum of the fight for justice. Learning from a history which fully and fairly includes the vast and varied contributions of women and people of color offers a departure point in our search for social change. We rethink the past to reshape the future. History is all around us, and we are all historians searching for the truth. In whatever ways we can honor the valiant women who came before us and bring their stories to light, let's do it. It doesn't have to be a statue or a historic house, although that would be great. How about a street sign, a garden, a women's history trail, a plaque at the site where she made history, or any number of other tributes to her courage and spirit. Monumental Women also hosts a variety of programs and workshops for those interested in learning more about women's history. "42 million people visit Central Park each year, and soon they will finally see some real monumental women. It is fitting that the first statue of real women depicts 3 New York women who dedicated their lives. Conveys the power of women working together to bring about revolutionary change in our society. It invites people to reflect not just on these great women and their work for equality and justice, but on all the monumental women who came before us. It's an instant history lesson. It challenges us to continue the fight for full equality for women in our lifetimes. Our Women's Rights Pioneers Monument will make a lasting statement to all future visitors in Central Park. A message written in stone and shaped in bronze that we all can and must move history forward.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Declaration of Sentiments, Seneca Falls, 1848.
Hi, this is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and I am so pleased to join you to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and the unveiling of these bronze ceiling breaking women. On August 26, 1920, decades of strategy and sacrifice, led by New Yorkers Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth, resulted in women across the country winning the right to vote. Every woman who votes, protests, or serves in office today does so standing on the shoulders of these 3 giants. I can't think of a better monument to the history and spirit of New York than these fiercely determined women who fought for a better, more inclusive, more just future. I know the courage and commitment of these monumental women will continue to inspire New Yorkers for generations to come.
Oh, we wear a yellow ribbon upon our woman's breast. We're prouder for its sunny hue than of a royal crest. 'Twas God's own primal color, born of purity and light. We wear it now for liberty, for justice and for right. 'Tis just 100 years ago, our mothers and our sires lit up for all the world to see the flame of freedom's fires. Through bloodshed and through hardship, they labored in the fight. Today we women labor still for liberty and right.
Hi, I'm Sky.
And I'm Ariel.
And we're bringing you a special report today live from Central Park. Did you know that there are no statues of real women in Central Park?
We want to change that.
I feel kind of sad. I feel like they're definitely underrepresented. It would be nice to have a few real women statues.
Yeah, and there's plenty of room for more statues in Central Park too.
In the United States and the history of women
and what they have overcome, I think that they rightfully deserve a statue, or two, or three.
I think it's just a good representation of the place women have in the society whatsoever, in science or politics. It's the same thing, yeah, which is not acceptable, but not surprising, yeah.
At times, and moving forward.
Wow, Ariel, it is so good to see you.
Hey, Sky.
Can you imagine it was 4 years ago when we were combating the bronze discrepancy in Central Park?
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Well, what a unique time in history as monuments and statues come down across the country. How powerful is it to see the arrival of suffragists Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, and Susan B. Anthony to the pedestal? Wow, would my curiosity have soared if I had seen suffragists as a young girl playing in Central Park. But now it will be a reality for other young girls in New York City and across the country to see the arrival of suffragists to the pedestal.
Absolutely, Sky. Even though we never had statues to be inspired by, our activism with monumental women empowered us to shape New York City history. This is just the start of a greater movement for our public spaces to celebrate women and people of color. Our energy can't stop with this statue. A century after the 19th Amendment, the struggle for voting rights must carry on this November. So let's vote.
When I was in 5th grade, my Girl Scout troop and I would march through Central Park every week with posters chanting, "Where are the women?" I remember being so confused as to why there were 0 statues of real women when there were so many of men. Not only does this statue represent a monumental moment and honors amazing suffragists who fought so hard for women's rights, but it also paves the way for hopefully more recognition of women and people of color. Thank you, and let's keep on making history.
For too long, women's history has been swept aside or simply ignored. No more. As we commemorate the centennial of the 19th Amendment, I'm proud that the Women's Rights Pioneers Monument honoring Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth will stand in Central Park as an inspiration for generations to come. Together, we will take this victory to Washington, D.C. by finally building a Smithsonian Women's History Museum on the National Mall and with the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment.
We'll have our rights. See if we won't. And you can't stop us from them. See if you can. Sojourner Truth, 1853.
Hi, I'm Ken Burns. Among the films I'm proudest of is our 1999 Not for Ourselves Alone, the story of the women's suffrage movement. As we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, I'm reminded that history comes alive through the act of remembering. And today we remember the work and lives of 3 extraordinary women who I believe are among the most important people in our country's history. The fiery orator, Sojourner Truth, the brilliant writer, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and the shrewd political activist, Susan B. Anthony. They will, for generations now, stand in Central Park to remind us of their day, our collective history, and the work ahead, creating a beautifully seamless connection between the past, the present, and our hope-filled future. These women are as responsible as anyone, not just for the passage of the 19th Amendment and the national franchise for women, but also through their work and words building on the greater dream of America, that we can together push our country forward to live up to the values we hold dear. I'm so honored to join all of you today for this historic occasion. Congratulations. And like you, I look forward now embraces the history of women in our country.
It means to me to have a woman statue in the park is if somebody was learning history, you would learn a lot because you see a woman statue and you know and you see what they were for and what they did to make your life better.
Monumental Women worked for 7 years to make this Women's Rights Pioneers Monument for Central Park possible. The site is part of Literary Walk, and Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony belong here because they changed the world with their words. So I've shown them working with words. They're gathered at a small table, doing what they loved best, thinking, arguing, forging resolutions, using their very different natures in a complementary way to fuel their struggle. They might be meeting in Stanton's home, where both Truth and Anthony had been overnight guests. The design is a contemporary evocation of the 19th century monument that should have been erected to these women in a park full of 19th century statues honoring men. Sojourner Truth has knitting in her lap. In photographs, Truth often displayed her knitting, which was intentionally symbolic. Knitting was not a skill taught to enslaved people. Knitting for soldiers was a patriotic duty, and it emphasized her status as a free woman and a lady. Anthony was famous for carrying her traveling bag, always full of documents, research for speeches she collaborated on with Stanton. Here it overflows with pamphlets for women's rights conventions, petitions to legislatures, and flyers for lectures by Sojourner Truth. Stanton has books and papers stashed under her chair, a feature common to statues of writers like the nearby male poets. In front is the 1848 Declaration of Sentiments, which begins, "All men and women are created equal." The 3 large books are by influential foremothers: Mary Wollstonecraft's 1792 A Vindication of the Rights of Women, Sarah Grimke's 1838 Letters on the Equality of the Sexes, and Margaret Fuller's 1845 Woman in the 19th Century. Stanton wears a brooch shaped like a sunflower, with shining flowers in the pattern of her dress, because she took the pseudonym Sunflower for her first published articles, and the sunflower later became an emblem of the women's suffrage movement. Anthony's brooch is a cameo of Minerva, the helmeted goddess of wisdom and strategy. Truth wears the kind of elegant jacket that she would wear at a women's rights conference, with victory wreaths woven into the brocade. Their hands tell a story, too. Truth emphasizes her eloquent voice with both hands. Her right index finger was partly amputated in an agricultural accident while she was enslaved. Anthony holds out a pamphlet that proclaims her one vast idea: votes for women. She's lightly touching Stanton's shoulder to draw her attention. Stanton has just dipped her pen in the inkwell and is about to write something on the blank paper she steadies with her left hand. The statues are portraits and at the same time represent aspects of activism: Truth speaking, Anthony organizing, and Stanton writing. Our rights were not gained by one dramatic action, but from long shared struggle. I hope that all people, especially girls and boys, will be inspired by the scene of monumental women of different races, different educational backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, and different economic status, working together to make the world better.
Good morning. Welcome to our guests here in Central Park, and to all of you from all over the world who've tuned in to the live stream of this event online. I hope you're sharing this moment with all of your friends. My name is Brenda Berkman. I'm a retired FDNY fire captain and a proud member of the Board of Monumental Women, the all-volunteer nonprofit organization responsible for bringing this monument to Central Park. What a great day. At long last, we are celebrating the unveiling of Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony. You're going to hear much more about the significance of this monument later, but first let me give you a quick preview. There will be music, speeches, videos, words to educate and inspire. Later in the program, we're thrilled to be joined by the Today Show. So I'm going to ask your patience as we make that happen. After the program in the park concludes, those of you watching online will see even more. We hope all of you will be motivated to support the continuing work of Monumental Women. I'm going to ask you to take this moment to acknowledge that this event is being held on the traditional lands of the Lenape people. And we pay our respect to elders both past and present. In saying this, we challenge ourselves and all people to learn more about the history of First Peoples and to breathe life into our obligations to their communities. Thank you. And now, I'm very proud to introduce my dear friend, FDNY firefighter Regina Wilson, an inspiring leader and the first woman president of the FDNY Vulcan Society. Regina will sing America the Beautiful with lyrics by Catherine Lee Bates.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with sisterhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriots' dream that sees beyond the years. Thy alabaster cities gleam that sees beyond the tears. America, America. this grace on thee, and crown thy good with sisterhood from sea to shining sea.
Regina, thank you. I'm Namita Luthra, and I'm on the board of Monumental Women. Pam Elam, our board president, has persisted through every obstacle to get us to this moment, whether you're here with us in the park or watching on live stream anywhere in the world. From her first speech on women's rights at age 13 in Kentucky to here today in New York, Pam's single-minded determination is how we got here. What propels her is an abiding respect for the lives of women and girls. It's evident in everything she does, and it's culminated in this monument and our ongoing mission. Please welcome Pam Elam.
Thank you so much. I am touched and grateful. And crown thy good with sisterhood. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And I thank the beautiful song from Regina. I thank Regina for that so much. I thank Namita for those very generous and kind words. And we are here to move history forward, and not even a pandemic can stop us. It's not often that you have a chance to be part of something truly historic. So let's make the most of it by redefining history to include all of us, by understanding that history is all around us, and we are all historians trying to rethink the past in order to reshape the future. For what we all seek is nothing less than a full and fair historical record that reflects and respects the contributions of all women and people of color. And we won't stop until we win that. But today, we celebrate. Monumental Women is proud that our all-volunteer, not-for-profit group broke the bronze ceiling in New York City's Central Park. It has taken 7 years. We have raised over $1.5 million in private funding. We have fought through many obstacles. But today, our Women's Rights Pioneers Monument honoring Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton will be unveiled as the first statue of real women in Central Park's 167-year history. The 42 million people who visit Central Park each year already see statues of Alice in Wonderland, Mother Goose, and Juliet, with Romeo, of course, as well as statues of witches, nymphs, and angels. But no statues of real women existed until now. Real women are no longer invisible here. The long wait is over. It is not, however, the first, nor will it be the last time women have waited for basic equality and justice, despite our never-ending activism to achieve that. As you know, August 26, 2020 is the centennial anniversary of the ratification and certification of the 19th Votes for Women Amendment to the United States Constitution. The banners held at the White House by the silent sentinels of the National Women's Party in 1917 said, "How long must women wait for liberty?" It is a question that women around the world still ask. It's a question that Truth, Anthony, and Stanton asked as well. They were New Yorkers and contemporaries fighting for equality and justice. They often spoke on the same stages and attended the same meetings. It is only fitting that they share the same pedestal. But creating the Women's Rights Pioneers Monument is only one of the goals of Monumental Women. In addition, we seek to increase awareness and appreciation of women's history through our education campaign, as well as our challenge to municipalities across the nation and the world. We issue that challenge today. We urge all cities to reimagine their public spaces to include tributes to the diverse women who helped create and inspire them. Little did we know that over the past 7 years, we would have to constantly challenge our own municipality as well, but we persisted. We thank our wonderful sculptor, Meredith Bergman. We're grateful for every contribution, large or small, from our many friends. Heartfelt thanks go to the New York Life Insurance Company for its extremely generous challenge grant, to the Ford Foundation, the Jane Walker Campaign, and other businesses and foundations you will hear about later in this program. We sincerely appreciate the money donated from cookie sales by Girl Scout troops 3484, 3482, and 3746. As well as bake sale contributions from children at the Brooklyn Mary McDowell Friends School. We received donations from over 1,000 supporters, and we thank every one of them. But as important as financial contributions were the expressions of support and encouragement we received from all over the country and around the world. We sincerely thank you for your kind words and meaningful messages. It's not easy to donate a work of art to the city of New York. It was not easy to take the long and bumpy bureaucratic roller coaster ride which traveled through the Parks Department, the Central Park Conservancy, the Public Design Commission, the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and every single community board surrounding Central Park. Through this ride, we had the strong support of Manhattan's great borough president, Gail Brewer. We can't thank you enough, Gail. And we also thank Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silver. Step by step, meeting by meeting, argument by argument, we crossed the minefield, which is New York City government. With the help of our project management team from the highly respected firm of Beyer, Blander, Bell, and our wonderful pro bono attorneys, we made progress. With hard work from our board of directors, additional support from the public, and more attention from the media, Monumental Women succeeded in gaining all the approvals and winning the fight. As we are often reminded, it does take a village to achieve a cherished goal, or in this case, it takes a metropolis. In New York City's public spaces, there are 150 statues, and only 5 of them are women. Now, thanks to Monumental Women, there are 6. For those of you who might think that the work of Monumental Women is done, I can assure you that we are here to stay. We have many other projects and statues in mind, so stay tuned. There are 2 themes that I hope you'll take away with you after you view this beautiful work of art today: the power of women's history and the power of voting. Through the gift of women's history, we discover an historical treasure chest, overflowing with the stories of women who serve to inspire and energize us. We learn of their strategies and tactics in the battle for equality. We learn of their courage and their imperfections. We look at the totality of their lives. We build on their work, we honor their memories, we vow to complete their journeys. A knowledge of women's history helps us understand the context of the struggle for equality, as well as the continuum of the fight for social change. We rethink the past to reshape the future. And we must not wait any longer. We demand and will continue to fight for full equality for women in our lifetimes. On Women's Equality Day, we think about the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and how hard generations of women had to fight for it. Yet we know that was only the first step in getting and keeping the right to vote. Let us honor all those women whose names we know and those whose names we may never know. And let them know that we will forever fight to protect that right to vote for all of us. Let us assure them that in every election, especially this November, we will vote like democracy depended on it, because it does. We owe it to those who came before us to keep moving history forward. They would expect that of us. One statue in one park can light a fuse that sparks the imagination and ambition of a child who sees herself in that statue. That one statue can start a chain reaction leading to an explosion of knowledge and possibilities. Monumental Women is proud to light that fuse today. Thank you all. And it is my pleasure now to introduce Manhattan's great borough president and our wonderful friend, Gail Brewer.
Thank you, Pam Elam. That was extraordinary. I can't think of three more deserving women to put on a pedestal in Central Park than Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony. Without them, we would not have the right to vote. But we would not be here today without the hard work, and I mean hard work, of monumental women, sculptor Meredith Bergman, council member Helen Rosenthal, Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silver, Central Park Conservancy President Betsy Smith, and their whole Conservancy team. And we all, of course, owe a special debt of thanks to Pam Elam, the president of Monumental Women, and my friend since 1978. I also want to thank Colleen Jenkins, Vice President of Monumental Women, as well as we know the great-great-granddaughter of Miss Stanton. I want to thank, yes, give her a round of applause. I also want to thank Penelope Cox, who's Director of Special Projects in the Office of Manhattan Borough President. And in the Mayor's Office, I want to express appreciation to Stacy Lynch and Allie Davis. I am so proud to have worked toward this accomplishment together. We're very honored in the audience today to have Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, Congress member Carolyn Maloney, whom you heard before, but she's in person, and Commissioner Pauline Toole, who's head of the Municipal Archives, whom we love. I have been an elected official for an awfully long time, but getting this statue approved was a major challenge like none other. 7 years ago, hardly anyone was talking about statues, and now folks mostly talk about tearing them down. Whether we agree or not about the content of our monuments, they mark the historical disposition of the city's people, of its spirit, and the temper of the times. Much as in the era of suffragists we honor today, it was just about 7 years ago that a few good women stepped forward to create history, and in the form of this powerful sculpture, affirm the leading role of women in our history, and in the historical importance of New York to the character of our nation. When the struggle to create this sculpture began, the city of New York, as you heard earlier, had only 5 works of civic sculpture portraying real-life women: Joan of Arc, Eleanor Roosevelt, Gertrude Stein, Golda Meir, and Harriet Tubman, and none were in Central Park. So we banded together, and in the spirit of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth, and the thousands of women who risked their lives for suffrage, we set out to break the bronze ceiling. It wasn't easy. Stanton, Anthony, and Truth must be smiling somewhere at the hoops the monumental women were made to jump through to create a statue honoring three of the most important figures in American history. The answer, no, came in many forms. The park is closed to new statues. Women don't want a statue, they want a garden. If we say yes to this statue, we'll have to say yes to any statue. And my personal favorite, you have to prove that each of these women had actually set foot in Central Park. Funding was a challenge, as it was for the suffragists. Only my office and that of City Council member Helen Rosenthal put in public money. But there were generous, as you heard earlier from Pam, individual donations and foundation support that have provided the rest. A huge highlight of the money chase was hearing that local Girl Scout troops were donating the proceeds of their cookie fundraising toward completion of the statue, and they did even more. Well, it took 70 years to get the boat, but only 7 to get the statue. And if you listen carefully, you can just hear Stanton's voice. Don't worry, ladies, we're getting there. In our own way, we too believed we were on the right side of history and sought to build a force to make change in the status quo. It's never easy. In the 100 years since suffrage passed, our franchise has in fact brought about what many in opposition feared. Our voices and their conviction have grown ever stronger through one struggle after another, and our grip on the levers of power ever more sure. It is sobering to recall that the women figured here not only never saw themselves honored by works of civic art, none lived to see the 19th Amendment ratified in 1920. But they knew that voting was only a right worth fighting if we exercise it. We're coming up on a monumental election. Not only our rights, but our lives are at stake. We must motivate everyone to be touched by our voices, by our love, and a belief in a constitutional republic that every vote must count. As we have seen, change begins in the streets. But to be effective, it must lead to the voting booth. This year, that franchise, won for us by these smart, courageous women, is once again our most important civil right. Now it is my distinguished pleasure to introduce Heather Nessel, the president of New York Life Foundation, a dedicated, and I mean dedicated, phenomenal, monumental woman board member, and my love, a true Upper West Sider.
Thank you, Gail. In the summer of 2016, I was home on maternity leave after having my second child, my daughter Paige, and I read about the Monumental Women effort. I couldn't believe it, and I vowed then and there to be a part of it. And my company, New York Life, agreed and issued a $500,000 challenge grant to make the statue a reality. That was in no small part due to our relationship with Susan B. Anthony, who was one of our first female policy owners. Her father, brother, and brother-in-law were agents of the company, and she used the cash value of her policy to actually get the first women admitted to the University of Rochester. A few months after that, I put Paige in my baby carrier, I grabbed my son Ben's hand, and I went to vote for the first female presidential candidate to be nominated by a major political party. After we voted, I asked somebody to take a picture, this picture, that hangs in my daughter's room. And it reminds her and my son Ben that they can strive to be anything they want to be, as long as they try hard and participate actively in our democracy. I mention this now because it is my great honor to introduce the woman that I voted for that day, the former senator from the great state of New York, Madam Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Oh, thank you. Wow, a very, very special thanks to all of you, particularly to Pam Elam. Thank you, Pam. And to the Board of Monumental Women for not only developing the idea of this statue, but persevering, fundraising, advocating, and then finally seeing that dream come true. And thank you for commissioning Meredith Bergman to sculpt it. Meredith, congratulations on your work and on breaking the bronze ceiling in Central Park with the Women's Rights Pioneers statue. And thank you, Heather. Thank you so much, Heather Nestle, and to New York Life Insurance Company for your strong support of this endeavor. And I love the idea that Susan B. Anthony's father and brother and her entire family was involved with New York Life Insurance Company way back when. And thanks to the thousands of donors, including the Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout and I loved hearing about your commitment to this, who chipped in with matching funds. And I want to thank all of the officials, appointed and elected, who are here, both in person and virtually, and in particular, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who carries on the battle for the Equal Rights Amendment, and also is now leading the charge to save our post office, so thank you very, very much. To my longtime friend, Borough President Gail Brewer, if you want something done that's hard, ask Gail to do it, because she will totally persevere. And to City Council member Helen Rosenthal, all of you took to heart Susan B. Anthony's famous decree that failure is impossible. I'm also really pleased that we could gather today for this event because with all that's going on, that wasn't guaranteed, but it seems especially appropriate that today, on Women's Equality Day, we are unveiling a new statue in Central Park for the first time in over 6 decades. The first statue of real, non-fictional women. The first statue of an African American. And significantly, a statue that depicts 3 great Americans working together. As you know, 100 years ago last week, Tennessee became the last state needed to ratify the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. That was the culmination of a decades-long struggle, and most of the women who took up that fight never lived to see the promised land. And many of those women were New Yorkers, like Sojourner Truth, who told the Ohio Women's Rights Convention in 1851, if the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women ought to together be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. Like Susan B. Anthony, whose arrest, which she was very proud of, for the crime of voting while female in 1872 was covered in the New York Times the next day under the heading, Minor Topics. And like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who never forgot that she and her fellow suffragists were fighting not for themselves alone, but for the generations that would follow. These 3 women worked side by side, not only on suffrage, but also on abolition. All 3 wanted universal suffrage for all Americans and were not happy when men of color got the vote without women. They had passionate disagreements, and Sojourner Truth spoke out against the racism she experienced as a black woman, including too often at the hands of white suffragists. Because while the passage of the 19th Amendment was a critical, important, historic victory, it was also an incomplete one. It would take decades longer to guarantee the franchise for women of color, especially Black and Native American women, and a century later, the struggle to enforce the right to vote continues. We're still fighting so that every eligible American can cast their ballot and know their vote will be counted regardless of race, age, or geography. As Sojourner, Susan, Elizabeth understood, we are all freer when every one of us is free. Our democracy belongs to all of us. Marches to the polls. And well, the pandemic changed all that. Events were canceled, exhibitions pulled down. Millions of Americans worried that these unprecedented circumstances might hurt the hopes we all have for the future of our country, including even the hope that they will be able to vote safely. But our current circumstances aren't as unprecedented as some might think. Remember, in the fall of 1918, during the suffragists' final push for the vote, there was another. Hundreds of thousands died here in the United States, and hope of passing the amendment started to fade. But the suffragists persisted. Yes, they postponed events. They wore masks. They held social. Women, including women of color, risked their lives to serve as nurses on the front lines against the epidemic and during the World War that was also going on. And between the tireless organizing and the brave contributions of women to their country, the tide of public opinion began to turn. And less than a year later, women won the right to vote. So, and carry them forward into our schools, the media, onto social media, into our lives. I hope everyone will promote not only the statue, but the efforts that Monumental Women is undertaking to ensure that this is the first. There is nothing more important, however, to honor the women portrayed in this statue than to vote. That is the best way to lead America forward. As a suffragist used to say, forward through the darkness, forward into light. Thank you for making sure we are reminded of that here in Central Park.
It's now time to unveil the Women's Rights Pioneers Monument. The back of the pedestal contains these words: donated by Monumental Women to the City of New York to honor women's history. Dedicated on August 26, 2020, the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Votes for Women Amendment to the United States Constitution. To assist me with the unveiling countdown are representatives of the Girl Scout troops that helped build this monument with their advocacy and donations of cookie money. They will stand at their seats when I call their names, and then together we will count down the unveiling. Pippa, Story, Jaya, Sophia, Catalin, are you ready? The Today Show is not ready, so we may be. So just as soon as they give me the word, we will count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're welcome to join us. Until that time, we waited 7 years, we can wait a few more minutes, right? And now, that was a sign. No, it was the no sign. 30 seconds. Well, you know, it gives me another opportunity to say that monumentalwomen.org is available to assist you in anything you want to do in terms of honoring women. It doesn't have to be a statue. It could be a street sign. It could be a plaque. It could be a garden, you know. The Parks Department seems to really love those. But it can be anything in order to show our respect to the women who've come before us. So I think that was 20 seconds, wasn't it? Stand by. The Girl Scouts are ready. We're all ready. We'll count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 when we get the signal. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Would you please stand up? Thank you, Meredith. It's gorgeous. Everyone will have an opportunity to take as many photos as you want in just a moment. And now we will find out if the Today Show is finished and then move along with the program.
I was born a slave in Ulster County, New York. They called me Isabella Baumfree, but after I left that house of bondage, I gave myself a new name, Sojourner Truth.
I was born Elizabeth Cady in Johnstown, New York. When I married Henry Stanton, we first lived in Boston, but then New York.
Born into a Quaker, anti-slavery family, and as a young woman became a teacher.
We little dreamed when we began this contest, optimistic with the hope and buoyancy of youth,
that half a century later we would be compelled to lead the liberation of women.
But, my friends, there is an army of them now where we were but a handful.
With such women consecrating their lives, failure is impossible.
Me llamaban Isabella Baumfree, pero después de que dejé la casa de servidumbre, me di un nuevo nombre, Sojourner Truth.
Yo nací Elizabeth Cady en Johnstown, Nueva York. Cuando yo me casé con Henry Stanton, vivimos de primero en Boston, pero después nos mudamos a las afueras de Seneca Falls, al norte del estado de Nueva York.
Yo soy Susan B. Anthony. Yo nací en una familia cuáquera en contra de la esclavitud. Y como una mujer joven, me convertí en maestra.
No nos imaginamos tanto cuando empezamos esta pelea, aún siendo optimistas y llenas de esperanza y energía por ser jóvenes.
Que medio siglo después, nosotras tendríamos que ceder el final de la batalla a otra generación de mujeres.
Pero, mis amigas, hay un ejército de ellas ahora, donde antes nosotras éramos unas cuantas.
Con tales mujeres consagrando sus vidas, el fracaso es imposible.
Good morning. I'm Ariel Deutsch, a proud board member of Monumental Women. It is my great honor to introduce the artist, Meredith Bergman, whose incredible monument we celebrate today. Meredith's talents are only matched by her commitment to social justice and historical redress. Through her public art across the nation, she brings history to life and inspiration to us all. It is such a privilege to have her statue live here in our very own Central Park. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you, Meredith.